Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pearls On, Gloves Off. I am your host, Mary O'Carroll, Chief Operating Officer at Goodwin. I loved my conversation today with Vanessa Wu, General Counsel at Rippling, the workforce management platform that unifies HR, IT, finance, and more, and allows businesses to execute more efficiently. At Rippling, Vanessa oversees both legal and compliance and has been one of the driving forces behind its global expansion, advising on compliance and hiring practices across the globe as the company has grown from 100 to perhaps 4,000 employees across a dozen countries. Vanessa comes from the school of really innovative and forward-thinking GCs that I love, and we talk a lot about how she's been able to scale her team through hypergrowth, but in a really deliberate way, taking lessons from her past role as GC of LiveRamp to create an efficient and effective way of working. She gets into how she's been able to create a standard sales agreement that is almost never negotiated and implemented that for thousands of customers, making her a hero to the product and sales teams, and I'm sure the leadership team as well. She's encouraging the real use of AI in the day-to-day work that they do and encouraging the team to be naturally curious and willing to try new things. Finally, we hear about how she operated gracefully under the pressure of a really stressful work crisis and navigated through it smoothly by having very intentionally prepared for the unexpected. Vanessa also wins her way into my heart by mentioning Google Gemini, Ironclad, and Goodwin Teams as secrets to her success. I promise I didn't make her say any of it, but I had a lot of fun during this hour together and I learned a lot, so I hope you will too.
Goodwin is wherever AI is, which means we'll be at HumanX, the #1 AI conference for business leaders. Join us on March 9th in Las Vegas for exclusive panels covering foundational legal and commercial topics pivotal to those navigating AI, including what to consider before making your next business decision. Visit goodwinlaw.com/HumanX for more details.
Hey, Vanessa, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. Let's just start with a little bit of background and context about you first.
I guess just for a little bit of background on me, I am the general counsel of Rippling, which is sort of all-in-one SaaS platform combining HR, IT, and financial services. And
Yep.
I've been here for about 5.5 years. I joined summer of 2019, back when the company had just finished its Series A, was a little over 100 employees. And fast forward to today, we are several thousand employees. I think
Wow.
recently finished our Series F in many, many countries in the world. And my team has expanded to include legal, compliance, and some enterprise risk, internal audit functions as well. So it's been a pretty exciting journey. Prior to Rippling, I was at LiveRamp, a publicly traded ad tech company. And prior to that, at Latham and Watkins, doing litigation, predominantly antitrust with some employment.
Awesome. And LiveRamp was your first GC role, right?
It was. I had joined LiveRamp just pursuing privacy. I was from the antitrust consumer protection space, really interested in data protection at that time. And it just wasn't an area that our firm was that focused on yet. GDPR hadn't gone into effect. I think most big law firms did not really have privacy data protection as they do now. And it was just like a really interesting time to join that type of business when GDPR went into effect, when Cambridge Analytica happened, when the California Consumer Privacy Act was then passed all in quick succession. So that was really the intent behind making that transition more than sort of like wanting to become a GC. That was sort of a happy accident.
Well, and I know your journey was fast and therefore very impressive. So what made you want to go in-house into your first role?
I was a litigator, and I feel like most litigators don't necessarily think of in-house being an option for them. And I was the same way. And so it really was this data protection bent. I thought if I went to an ad tech company, I would get to be on the front lines of a company that was experiencing privacy and data protection type legal issues. And that would just be like a really interesting place to practice. And that definitely became true. I was also like the first and only attorney of the LiveRamp subsidiary. It had been acquired at that point, and then we sort of went through a number of corporate transitions while I was there, hence the GC role and title. but just sort of following what is really interesting to one, I think has always served me well, and I find serves like my colleagues well. So that's really all it was. It wasn't any sort of desire to be in-house. My thoughts for myself were going into government at that time.
Okay. And was it what you expected? Was it very different than, the law firm life, or was it eye-opening? Yeah, tell us.
Completely different than law firm life. Definitely not what I expected. I don't know what I expected, and in several ways. I think the incentives are entirely different in-house.
Mhm.
So when you're at a law firm, one of the things that always frustrated me about law firms, which I think frustrate most law firm attorneys, is the billable hour.
Of course, yeah.
And I get it. It is really hard to quantify a lawyer's work. And so by making it an hourly charge that is like a fair bargain across like most law firms and clients.
Mhm.
The main downside I see to that is it really disincentivizes efficiency, and that just drove me nuts at the law firm where I
Mhm.
was working. If you could write in a really amazing brief in half the time, like, that might be personally fulfilling, and your client would be happier because it
Yep.
costs a lot less, it's more efficient. But as a business proposition, that's not ultimately a good thing for the law firm, and
Right.
that's just, like, really hard to square as, like, an efficiency nut. Like, you want the highest quality work for the least cost, like, at all times. In-house at any business, like, that incentive is just going to align a lot better because the business is not legal services, it's whatever product that company is selling. And I know sometimes that's why people don't wanna go in-house, but I think it also is a reason to be in-house because you have to think really critically about what the legal function is offering and like how efficient you are being, and are there new ways to innovate as new technology comes about to continue eking out and increasing that efficiency as a team. And that's not just like efficiency in commercial work. I think that's always where people like their minds go to. It's also in product counseling, in compliance, in like risk management, in the way that you're interacting with outside counsel, like sort of across the board, not
Yeah.
just like contractual.
No, absolutely. You're going from being a revenue generator at a law firm to really part of a cost center, right? When you're in-house. And so with your limited amount of time, you have to make it stretch across all the work that needs to get done across the department.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you think about that, and I know that you have efficiency as part of like your heart and soul and who you are. So when you mentioned the hyper growth that Rippling has gone through already, what was it, 100 to several thousand in your company?
Yeah, I don't know our exact employee count right
Yeah.
now. I think we're nearing 4,000, somewhere in the 3 to 4,000 range, so a lot of folks.
And that's a lot of growth in just a handful of years that you've been there, right?
Yeah, yeah, in about 5.5 years.
So we recently had a couple episodes ago, Brian Israel, who's the general counsel of Anthropic, and we talked a
Mhm.
lot about the hypergrowth and, being the first attorney there and scaling that department. Were you the first lawyer at Rippling as well?
I was. I was the first lawyer at Rippling. I had been the first lawyer at LiveRamp, so I understood what that meant. Full hats off to every solo GC out there. It is a very hard job. You don't have a backup. Everything does fall on you. I was really excited about that opportunity at Rippling because I had done it before, but I had inherited a lot at LiveRamp, whereas at
Mhm.
Rippling, it being just much younger, I could sort of build in the way from scratch that I wanted to. One of the things I have been, I guess, don't really tout much internally, but just sort of am personally like really excited about with our team is how staunch we've been able to maintain essentially a no red line policy, and that we have all 20,000 plus customers on our online agreement.
And that's like your sales agreement?
Our sales agreement,
Okay.
yes. And that leads to efficiency for our product in terms of we're not maintaining different versions of our product for different customers.
Yeah.
It's, like, incredibly fair. It means everyone is getting the same terms. You can look at it. Like, our commitment is to ensure that they're benchmarked and we're, meeting today's standards and giving folks adequate protections, it also means that all of our customers can look around and say, yeah, I'm on equal footing with every other one of Rippling's customers with respect to these terms. And it sort of also unlocks innovation because you're not having to let certain customers essentially hold back in a way. No one thinks of it that way, but when you're negotiating terms, you're making it hard for the vendor to innovate in a
Yeah.
way. You're sort of adding these additional approvals and roadblocks to innovation for the product and engineering teams.
Yeah, super interesting. So let's back up a little bit. I've recently worked at Ironclad, which I know is what you're using, which
Yeah.
is a similarly like high growth SaaS company. And for our legal department, certainly like the number one driver of work is going to be the sales contracts, right? The closing deals at the end of every month, every quarter, but also obviously throughout the year. I imagine that was the same driver of volume of legal work for you as the first lawyer and then kind of as your team as you grew up
It never has been the number one driver because I got here
because of
so
this.
early. We were able to set out a deal, essentially a handshake between myself and our chief revenue officer and our CEO that we would always explain our terms. If any customer has any question about any of our terms, we are happy to have the feedback, happy to have those discussions, happy to explain. If we are wrong, if we think we should make a change, we make a change for every customer. It's not
Yeah.
gonna be an individualized, like, event, and that if sales wanted to have, like, further negotiation, we never actually implemented this. We could start thinking about putting a policy in place where sales could cover the cost of commercial negotiations, and then they were like, "No, no, 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 we got this.
Yeah, it's
We're
fine.
good." But just putting the incentives in the right place, I think, does a lot because ultimately commercial legal costs are part of the sales process, and I don't think most companies capture that as part of the cost of customer acquisition, but it should.
Yeah. I love this story. I find it so interesting because you've had this blessing of an opportunity to basically start from scratch or start like an organization, a legal department that was clean, without inheriting everything after you'd already run LiveRamp, learned, the challenges of running a legal department and like what you would have done differently, right? If you had started from scratch and taken those learnings. And so when you first started at Rippling, knowing that this was gonna be like a high volume area and making that go away, was that hard to do? Like, tell me about your journey in making that happen and how you sort of identified that to all your stakeholders that this was maybe a different way of doing things, but the way that you thought was the right way.
It was sort of advocating for the business that this company wanted to become. Yes, we were only about 100 plus folks at that time, but even at that time, our C-suite had the vision of building a massive outcome and looking towards those other benchmarks like Microsoft and Amazon and Salesforce and others, these mega software platforms and how they do contracting. One of the biggest fights in legal contracting is over liability caps,
Yep.
particularly in data breaches. I wish we could quantify the amount of spend and hours between commercial lawyers talking about caps, super caps, like 1x, 2x, 3x, monthly, yearly, what have you. Because that amount of cost alone, I feel like is not equal to the amount that's ever been paid out under some
Right.
of these caps. And the reality is, we're just talking about risk shifting when at the end of the day, every cloud based software platform is using Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud.
Mhm.
And all of them have pretty standard 6 month or 12-month caps, period. And I've really yet to hear about people ever negotiating something beyond that because they're
Right.
really sort of the underlying plumbing for this entire ecosystem. And so it always boggles my mind that we don't have more consistency on the software application layer when underneath we're all getting the same level of coverage from our cloud providers. They're able to maintain a standard. So why can't we maintain a standard? And that somehow is compelling internally.
Yeah, and did you get pushback? Do you continue to get pushback from your customers, your new customers and prospects about that? And people always wanna negotiate, right? Even when you say it's non-negotiable.
We do have a commercial team, but a very small one, and they also work on procurement and vendor agreements as well. And like, really, hats off to them for maintaining this volume at this size and scale. I think some customers do want to push back. And I think, as I mentioned, we will hear them out. And we've also now just developed a lot of collateral on here's our contracting approach. Here are all of the other providers we've benchmarked these terms against. Here's
Yeah.
how we can give you assurance. We put a lot of work into explanation
Interesting.
to get people comfortable with the terms as is.
Yeah.
And then it is pretty compelling to say, are you customer legal counsel, like somehow unique in that these tens of thousands of other customers don't have this thing you're advocating for, why you? And having built up that base now is incredibly effective.
Yeah. I bet it gets easier as you have more of a base. And tell me about when you were crafting your template or your standard language, you had to, of course, make that very fair, right? And very pro customer as well. What was that journey like? Did you work with outside counsel? Like, how did you think through how to make it as fair as possible to both sides?
A few layers there. I guess in full disclosure for the listeners of this podcast, we are both customers of Ironclad, but we have also been long-term clients of Goodwin as well. So Goodwin had a first draft. And then when I came in, it was really understanding who our key competitors were,
Uh-huh.
because that's who we would be negotiating against. Even though you're not like actively negotiating against them, like that is usually a buyer is comparing a couple different solutions
Sure.
and you want your terms to be fair in that marketplace. And so it was looking at those key competitors, understanding how they were slicing and dicing liability, what kind of reps and warranties they were offering, and making that match up with what we felt was appropriate. And then as Rippling has expanded over time, because we've added additional products beyond payroll and HR, we now have a corporate card. And so we have the corporate card competitors and bill pay or IT services or employer record services that we also look at those competitors, their terms, and have that all benchmarked and as part of our collateral for potential customers.
How interesting. And then when you send out this contract now, is it just like a click to accept because you wanna tell them it's not really negotiable, or how does it, like,
It's
work?
always been since I joined at Rippling on online terms
Oh, wow, okay.
and then referenced in our order form from
Gotcha.
a and I think, you were asking sort of like, was this the focus from the get-go? It was a big focus for me from the get-go, but because it is what the Rippling business demanded. And
Yeah,
what I mean by that is Rippling sort of structurally, and I think this is like really important for folks who are in-house, like understanding what your particular business needs. Rippling structurally is trying to build a ton of different businesses around the employee data system of record at once. And so that requires us to try to put as much of our resourcing into engineering to not to build all of these different solutions all at the same time. What that means for every function, including legal, is that I want to try to have as much resourcing around these different products as possible. So, like product counseling, our employer of record, that's something that is highly legal in nature. We are employing personnel on behalf of our customers in all of these different countries. And so that is a very like intensive exercise for the legal team to understand like what are the employment rules in say Germany and how do we do this so that we are compliant and we're not exposing our customers to risk. And so trying to think about how we slice and dice our resources as a legal team and make sure that we're able to spend as much time on the product counseling means trying to find in almost a natural efficiency level
right.
on commercial contracting. And so I think a lot of solutions are geared toward making the negotiation faster, making the negotiation more seamless, but like even more efficient than that is just to try to eliminate the negotiation. So that's always been our like high watermark is
Mm.
not eliminate it unfairly, but how do we create terms, create emotion, create training so that we can get as close to that as we possibly can.
Yeah, the ideal situation for both parties, really. No one wants to waste time on these things.
And I think a lot of negotiation comes from not wanting to be the person who got screwed.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, like everyone else gets that. There's certain vendors out there that you're like, you have to negotiate. And if you ask for XYZ, you get the better SLA. And if you ask for this, and so then you negotiate because you actually get meaningful concessions.
right.
And these vendors have actually created a playbook that you only get more if you ask for more.
Which is why I think the crafting of your initial document to be very fair to both sides, all the documentation that you've now created about like why it's fair is really important to educate
Yeah.
both sides.
The
Yeah.
one specific one we did there is, so I mentioned like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Azure. I forget if they're at 12 months or 6 months, but most SaaS providers cap their liability in their standard forms at 12
Mhm.
months or a year. We do 18 months off the bat. And that was sort of one of those concessions to demonstrate like a step in the right direction for our customers. Okay, we're going to go a bit above and beyond. Yes, if you go to some other SaaS providers, you can negotiate up to 18. You might even be able to negotiate to 19,
Yeah.
but we're just going to do 18 across the board instead of the 12 months that all of our competitors were at.
Great. This whole story is just one example of kind of what I alluded to at the beginning of this episode, which is that you're very focused on creating the legal department of the future. I think those were the words that you used and thinking about, how can you do things in an innovative way, in a different way? I'm sure there are other things you're thinking about, like AI and how AI is being used across the legal team specifically at Rippling.
I'm flinching a little bit with legal department of the future because it sounds very like self-aggrandizing. And I don't mean it in that way. I do think the legal profession has a bad habit of being behind the ball with new technology.
Absolutely.
And there's just sort of a resistance to change. As a profession, we're generally more risk
Risk
adverse
averse. Yep.
and sort of see the downsides of the new technology and less of the positives there. I'm on a lot of these sort of GC listservs when ChatGPT came out and other large language models started becoming more popularized. Every channel was threaded with who has an AI policy, like, how do we suppress almost? And that's not the intention. It was like, how do we make sure this doesn't catch on
Protect ourselves.
fire? And we've put in like appropriate guardrails
Sure.
for the organization. But there was this overwhelming amount of volume among the legal community about guardrails
Mm,
and very little about like how could we use this technology to accelerate this profession. There is a lot of like guardrails and a lot of fear about being replaced
yep.
and not as much, hey, this could be an accelerant. Like
Yeah.
maybe it is not a great use of junior attorney legal time to be doing doc review and tagging documents hot, not hot, relevant, not relevant, like I did when I was a first year associate and costing that amount of funds. I remember as a first year associate thinking, like, this is a bummer that you take folks who've just graduated from law school who are at their peak amount of excitement
Yes.
about the legal profession.
Yes.
And then you're like, you know what? You are now qualified to, some folks go off to clerk and they're like shaping decisions, like meaningful court decisions, and others are being very well compensated and saying, this is relevant, this is not relevant. And I needed a
Totally.
legal degree to do that. Like, maybe it's a good thing that we are now, like, having tools that do a really good job at doc review as just, like, one of those examples,
Mhm.
so that at Rippling, our mission is to free smart people to work on hard problems, AKA automate all the administrative work that is associated with running the business. Is there a lot of administrative work associated with the legal profession? Like, absolutely, that could be automated to free up folks who have spent all of this time getting this education, who really enjoy high level complex reasoning to spend more time doing the complex legal reasoning and less time on the administrative work.
Yeah, philosophy aligns a lot with mine and with, I think, a lot of folks who are trying to innovate in our space. You're right. There's a lot that is part of this industry structurally that prevents us from wanting to jump in and to try this, but there's so much upside. And I love that there are leaders like you that are thinking that way. Are you encouraging your team, like specifically your team, to use AI
I
in their day
am.
to day?
What happened is over the summer, my daughter broke her arm. She's 9. And so she couldn't go to soccer camp. And so she accompanied my husband to his office. And then I was being sent all of these text messages and videos that our daughter was having a blast making PowerPoints using Google's Gemini. And she was making a PowerPoint about chips. And I was like, chips as in food or chips as in like computer chips? And it was chips as in food. I got home that night and she was so excited to show me this like really high quality, perfectly formatted slideshow about chips as in food. There was a slide about Cheetos, like the orange crunchy chip,
My
and like
favorite
there was
kind.
one about Fritos, and there was one about Lay's. She would just generate new images and new text until she found what she wanted. That was like my revelation moment, which was her generation is going to work entirely differently, developing pretty high quality content at this age just using Gemini. And that's really when I started checking out all of the LLMs a lot more. And at Rippling, we have enterprise GPT in-house. And then when O1 came out, I started saying like we need to get much more serious about this. So we're doing planning for 2025, thinking about legal vendor budget and checked out a couple different solutions. There's the language models like ChatGPT and Gemini. There's a bunch of like legal specific AI software vendors that
Mhm,
actually are looking really cool and really innovative. And then there's
mhm.
the traditional data providers like the Westlaw,
Yep.
Lexis, and so on and so forth. And we decided after testing a few to just make sure everyone on the team was using ChatGPT. That's where we've landed right now. I do like highly encourage the team to try to think about ways to incorporate the LLMs into their day to day and then to share what they've discovered because it's a little bit different for every person. And what I've noticed is there's like these stages of acceptance. First time someone like they're like, "Oh, I can." And yes, we have like our contained enterprise version. Yes, you can upload a document and ask for a summary or analysis or a compare or like a rephrasing for a different audience. Then folks sort of feel like they're cheating is what I've noticed. And sort of like getting folks over the, like, "Hey, I'm cheating by
Yeah,
using this tool." Like, I've been trying to liken it to you can handwrite your essay or you can use word processing and you can type it. So it's like you can operate, like, using word processing now, or you can word process and use a GPT or large language
yeah.
model to help accelerate. And so I do really encourage folks to just explore and experiment. And we now take part of our like team all hands to go into breakout rooms and have people explore with different props. So like
Oh,
I'll
cool.
often take our company's financials, which we share with the whole company, but they're very much in financial speak. And oftentimes, like lawyers and compliance professionals have a hard time understanding like all of the acronyms, ERR, and what our gross margins mean. And is this good? Is this bad? And sort of my view is there's no longer any excuse for anyone on the team to not understand the financial metrics of this business because you can upload it into ChatGPT and you can have it summarized for wherever you are at and then you can ask questions. And
Yeah.
so even using it as a tool to have better understanding with cross-functional teams, what content they're providing, fitting that content in a way that they can understand as well.
Yeah, it's not cheating. It's more like you can view it as a life hack, which is, the positive spin on making something easier for you. Like it's a hack, it's not cheating. So it's a good thing.
Yes,
Do it
you
the hard
should
way. Yeah.
you should learn how to do
Yeah.
math, but you should also learn how to use a calculator
Yeah.
and maybe an Excel spreadsheet as well.
It is a tool. And you mentioned, with your daughter, it's a great story. The idea that they're going to work very differently, this next generation. And then you also talked about how when you were trained and you were clicking on documents and doing doc review the old fashioned sort of manual way compared to the way it's done by AI now and software. How do you think about this whole like, how do we train associates in the future, right? The skill set that you need is going to be different. But should you know how to do math, even though you can use a spreadsheet, are you ever going to actually do long division? How do you think about what it means today to have these tools? And if that changes, if they don't learn to draft or if they don't learn to sit in the room and go through documents, that they'll never be the lawyer that we want them to be? What's your philosophy on that?
I think it's still really important to be able to do the work and use the tools. And that's what I hope to see continue in terms of training at law firms and in house.
Hmm.
I think my fear for the team is just that, and most in house teams, is that they get out innovated. And unless you're actually putting time and intention to saying, we're going to embrace these tools, because there's already this just like natural resistance
Mm,
from these functions, I think it really takes saying, we are going to embrace these tools and we want to build the legal and compliance functions of the future to get people to unlock that creativity to go where they maybe didn't feel that they had permission to go, and to like rethink some of those underlying assumptions, like doc review requires an individual to click yes or no versus maybe we can do an automated layer and do more comprehensive checks.
right.
And maybe it will create more time to review the hot documents for relevancy. And so, like, then I'm better focusing my time on the most important things. So it's not really getting rid of the underlying training, it's maybe removing more of the noise.
Yeah, and the mindset and the culture, it sounds like that you've set out for everyone is to really focus on efficiency and effectiveness and moving quickly and being agile, which is great. Do you train for that? Do you hire for that quality, or is that something that you just kind of put over the top as like a cultural layer?
It's definitely an expectation. In terms of hiring for someone who would succeed at rippling, I have like sort of one quality I look for above all the others, which
Yeah.
is curiosity.
Yeah.
And that
Great.
is for any role, not just legal and compliance roles. Sometimes I'm interviewing for roles outside of our immediate function. And the tip the scale is always, does this person have thoughtfulness about what they're doing? Are they excited about sort of reinventing what they're doing? Are they thinking about sort of other businesses or other functions? Just demonstrating that level of curiosity generally breeds a lot of success here.
Do you think you're able to suss that out in an interview? Or do you have questions or things that you try to?
Really whatever an interviewee is talking about, just asking follow-up questions and drilling in tends to demonstrate how far they've gone themselves.
Yeah.
If that's a lawyer who has worked on a litigation case or a deal, just probing about that deal or about that litigation matter, I think it comes through how deeply they've researched it, how
Yeah.
much they've thought about all of the different factors that have gone into that particular deal and the dynamics, and what happened at the very end and what went wrong and what went right and what they would have done differently. I think all of that goes to curiosity.
Yeah, I agree. That used to be something I would always try to interview for as well, is this, does this person have natural curiosity? So sort of related, I also know that you're a big believer in learning on the job and how you can learn a lot from high stakes and high pressure moments. I know that you've had to tackle challenges that were unexpected as well in your career and like demonstrate grace under fire. And I believe you mentioned kind of the Silicon Valley Bank crash and having to do a financing over the weekend, and that was like an unexpected thing. Tell me about that chaos and the collaboration and like how everyone learned from that and rose to the occasion to make it successful.
I wouldn't say I'm an advocate for learning on the job. I just do think it tends to happen quite a bit. Sort of related to your question, and speaking of interviews, sometimes folks are often, expressing that they are really good at building the train tracks while the train is moving. And they are like expert at building the airplane when the airplane is flying. I totally understand where people are coming from. They're trying to indicate, I'm not a stodgy lawyer. I'm not a stodgy compliance person. I can pivot and
Right.
I am fast moving and I am flexible and all the things that are definitely necessary in house. But I often say, I'd really rather that the train tracks be already built. I'd rather be riding on a train that was going on tracks. And I'd rather be in an airplane that was not being built while it was in the air. I'd rather we actually have fully built that airplane and checked it and fully gassed up, has all its safety checks in order, like the oxygen masks are going to work. As a passenger, that would be my preference.
Yeah. But
And
you can't
and
always have that,
you
right?
can't
Like,
always have that, but I think you can North Star plan.
sure.
And I'm a big believer in North Star planning. And so, like we were talking about legal teams, like you can North Star plan that the future of a legal team is not going to look like it looks like today. And that a lot of administrative roles will be automated and more efficient and more accurate using new technology. And you can start to think about proactively, like what those changes might look like and retrain your own team to meet what that future world is look like and have an opinion on it. Similarly, with like the Silicon Valley Bank crisis that Rippling had last year, and what that was, Rippling, among its many products and services, also has a payroll product. And as part of payroll in the United States, payroll companies have custody of funds typically for about 4 days before that payment is released because it takes about 4 days to go through our ACH system.
Sure.
When Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, Rippling was a banking customer with Silicon Valley Bank. And that Friday was a big payroll day for hourly workers. That was like March 10th, I believe. And that following Wednesday was March 15th. So it was the semi monthly payroll run. So all of those funds, Friday payroll and the mid monthly pay cycle, were being held in this Silicon Valley Bank account. And they were protected, they were insured, but the FDIC had frozen those assets and we did not have any sense of when that would be released. And obviously, lots of customers, and more importantly, their thousands and thousands of employees,
Oh
everyday
boy.
American workers
Yeah.
across the country, are wondering when they're going to get their paycheck because they have bills to pay, they have mortgages to pay, they have health insurance to pay. Deal for our customers, their employees, big deal for us as a company. We ultimately made the decision to do a financing that Friday. Our CEO, Parker, is a fundraising extraordinaire. We had a term sheet in hand by that Friday evening.
Wow.
We negotiated the terms over the weekend and then closed. And, part of those terms were the money needs to be able to be wired. I think it was 500 million that Monday. And what we plan to do with it is, if needed, loan it out to our customers through our platform to cover the payroll differences to ensure that our customers and their employees would be paid on time. I don't know that anything prepares you for that, but the reason we were able to do it is because we do a lot of North Star planning at the company. Like, we were able to do it because we were able to migrate our entire payroll system over to JP Morgan over the course of a weekend. We were able to do that because we had bank accounts with JP Morgan through our money transmitter licenses. We were able to do that because we had started obtaining money transmitter licenses 2.5 years before, to go through state by state, every state that we would need money transmission so that we could do it through our own bank accounts.
Hmm.
And so I do think there's how you are handling the unexpected event, but also like how you have planned to create redundancy in your system so that you're able to do that. I think that's sometimes what folks don't see is just like how many pieces we had in place to make this happen. We're able to fundraise because we had all of our disclosures ready to go. We try
Yeah.
to keep those up to date. We try to think like a fundraising should never be a surprising event. We're a private company that's a high growth tech company. We're going to seek additional capital through that life cycle. Like, it's not a surprise that we may, at a moment's notice, want to fundraise and that we would need to have disclosures ready and that we should just know what our disclosures are and that's healthy for the company. So just trying to think through some of those things makes it a lot easier, and it's why we're able to pull the full diligence folder together overnight.
Wow. That's a tremendous story. It sounds also very stressful, but you also make it sound like just another day at work.
No, it was definitely, like, maybe the least sleep I've ever,
Yeah,
had,
I'm sure.
I don't know if in my life, but maybe.
Really
And, yeah,
smooth.
major kudos to the team at Goodwin on the corporate side who helped us make that happen. I
Oh, that's great to
definitely
hear.
have immense gratitude because for us, it was an existential moment for our business
Yeah.
at the law firm. It's obviously not like the existential moment for Goodwin's business, but like seeing your client go through one of those moments and rising to the occasion.
Yeah. It's good to know that you had those relationships all set up and ready to go when you needed them too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So as we approach 2025, what's kind of on your radar for next year? Do you have big North Star plans for the year or any big priorities that you're thinking about?
We covered the main one, which is like I have been playing around a bunch with not a whole bunch of AI tools, just the LLMs, because I feel like they are really powerful on their own and increasingly so at such a rapid clip. Just staying with all of the new releases of Gemini and GPT on their own is an endeavor, but just rethinking through every single one of our processes and seeing how we might leverage some of these tools to do our work
Yeah.
better has been really exciting. And I love it now when we have a bunch of European operations. There's like a new FCA consultation paper on safeguarding that was released a few weeks ago that was like 200 to 300 pages. You can pop that into an LLM, get a really nice summary, still work with outside counsel, but you can get nice, good reads on Pacific Standard Time and then go to European Council after that. And same with things that come out in other languages. I think it's just like a really exciting time to be in our profession and think about how to incorporate some of these new tools.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Vanessa, it's been such a pleasure. You are a true innovator and inspiration. I love the way that you're running your department. It's safe to say that we all look forward to watching what you do next. So thank you for your time and for sharing your stories with us.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, everyone.